The bar was dim, quiet, and nearly empty, just the way I needed it to be. I sat with a half-full glass of red wine in front of me. My second that night, maybe third. I had lost count. Strangely, I wasn't tipsy, not even close. The alcohol refused to touch the storm gnawing inside me. I wasn't drinking to celebrate or to unwind. I was drinking to numb, but the numbness wouldn't come. Not tonight. Not after what I had heard just hours earlier. On any other evening, I might have admired the rustic charm of the place, the warm, minimalist design, the soft glow of pendant lights casting a gentle amber over wood and stone. But today, nothing could reach me. Nothing could penetrate the fog that had settled over my brain, thick and paralyzing. It was supposed to be a routine checkup, a quick lunchtime visit to the company clinic, just part of the standard health screening for employees. I remember tapping my foot impatiently in the waiting room, annoyed that the nurse was running behind. I had emails to answer, reports to review, and barely enough time to grab a sandwich before my next meeting. I didn't expect anything more than a few stamps and signatures on a form. But then the doctor called me in and said, "We need to talk." He was an older man, gray at the temples, with eyes far too gentle for the words he was about to deliver. He asked me to sit down, and that was when the world began to unravel. Breast cancer. Aggressive. Already spreading to the lymph nodes. He didn't sugarcoat it, which, in a detached and twisted way, I appreciated. He laid it out plainly. Surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. 6 months if I delayed treatment. 9 if I was lucky. A year at best, if everything went right. I heard the words. I nodded when he paused. I even thanked him before leaving his office, but none of it felt real. It was like watching a movie where I was both the main character and a dispassionate observer. I walked back to the office, sat at my desk, and typed numbers into spreadsheets like a ghost. The truth didn't hit me until I got home that evening. The moment I shut the front door behind me, the air in the apartment felt heavier. I stood in the hallway, still holding my purse, staring into the shadows of a life I had built, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, for a family that had long stopped seeing me. My husband, Andrew, was sprawled on the couch in his usual spot, eyes glued to the television, controller in hand. He didn't even glance at me when I walked in. "Dinner," he mumbled, barely audible over the sound of gunfire from his game. I didn't answer. I just kept walking until I reached the bedroom, locked the door, and let the first tear fall, not because I was dying, not yet, but because I had spent 20 years keeping this family afloat, dragging a lifeless marriage behind me like dead weight, convincing myself that things would eventually get better, that somehow, someday, I'd be seen. And now, with a silent killer growing inside me, I realized no one had ever really looked. No one but me. Hours later, I returned to the bar, still dressed in the same work clothes, now wrinkled and tight around my chest where the tumor had made its quiet home. And here I was, swirling wine in a glass, pretending that something, anything, might dull the sound of that doctor's voice in my head. 6 months, maybe 9. That was all the time I had left. Andrew hadn't always been this way. Or maybe he had, and I just didn't want to see it. When we first met, he was charming in that easy, unthreatening kind of way. He had a boyish smile, a guitar, slung over his shoulder, and a softness in his voice that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He could talk about literature and music, and he made you believe he had depth. I was in my early 20s then, working my way through accounting school, living on canned soup and hope, and he was beautiful in a way that made struggle feel worth it. But beauty fades, and so does charm. What remains is character, and Andrew didn't have any. He moved in with me before we even got married, said his lease was up, and I was too in love to say no. At the time, I thought we were building something. But really, I was the one building. And he was just there, always there, playing video games, reading self-help books he never finished, watching videos about how to manifest success. But not once did he ever go out and actually look for a job. Not seriously. The only time he ever showed real motivation was when he found some online business course claiming to teach you how to make 6 figures from home. He begged me to cover the cost, $2,000 we didn't have. He promised it would change everything. It didn't. 2 weeks later, he called it a scam and went back to the couch like nothing had happened. I was the one who paid off that credit card, just like I paid for the rent, the groceries, the bills, the furniture, even the damn gaming console he spent most of his waking hours glued to. When our daughter Lena was born, it was me who got up at 3 a.m. for feedings. Me who went back to work after 8 weeks so we wouldn't fall behind on the mortgage. Me who handled every doctor's appointment, every school meeting, every scraped knee and fever. Andrew? He'd bring me a glass of water now and then, maybe heat up leftovers. And every time he acted like he had just rescued me from a burning building. His mother, Margaret, never once saw anything wrong with him. She called him my sweet boy, well into his 30s. And every time we argued, she'd be on the phone within the hour. "Helen, he's just sensitive," she'd say. "You need to encourage him, not criticize." Encourage what? His high scores on Xbox? After years of begging her to help him get on his feet, Margaret finally pulled some strings and got him a job with the city, assisting visiting dignitaries. It was the perfect setup, schmoozing, dressing nice, pretending to matter. But even that, he managed to screw up. He called a mayor's young wife his daughter, forgot to notify hotel staff about, well, a situation involving a guest and a woman who wasn't his wife. It wasn't long before he was let go. Too much liability, they said. After that, he just gave up entirely. He stopped pretending. He'd wake up at noon, shuffle around in sweatpants, and complain about the noise from the construction across the street. Meanwhile, I was clocking 60 hours a week to keep the lights on. Once I tried to lay down the law, told him he'd be responsible for cleaning and making dinner. He waved his hand like he was granting me a royal favor. Sure, babe, no problem. That lasted 3 days, even Lena noticed. At 20, she was already juggling school and a part-time job, but she still managed to do more around the house than her father. One night, after a long shift, she came home to find me scrubbing the kitchen floor. She looked at Andrew lounging on the couch and said flatly, "You know, if you're going to be useless, at least don't be in the way." He didn't respond, just paused his game, looked at her, then back at the screen. That was when I realized my daughter had grown up watching me carry this entire family, and she was already learning not to make the same mistake. Lena was my only child, my one quiet miracle in a life that had become painfully predictable. I gave birth to her in the middle of a snowstorm, in a rundown hospital on the south side of Chicago, while Andrew paced the hallway like a nervous actor playing the role of concerned husband. He held her once, maybe twice, then quickly returned to whatever distraction waited on his phone. But I didn't care. She was mine. Her tiny fists, her squinting eyes, the way she grasped my finger like she knew. I was all she had from the beginning. I promised myself she would never feel the kind of loneliness I had felt growing up. She would never question whether she mattered. I worked overtime to keep her in private school as long as I could. I skipped lunch for years just to save up for her violin lessons. Every report card, every honor roll ribbon, every tiny win, those were my oxygen. And she didn't disappoint. Lena was bright, driven, sharp-witted in ways that reminded me of my younger self, before the weight of marriage and bills and broken promises dulled my edges. She got into a good university just outside the city, majoring in public administration. She wanted to work in government. "Real change starts from inside, Mom," she told me once, her eyes shining like she actually believed it. God, how I envied that kind of hope. She worked part-time at a flower shop run by a friend of ours to help cover her books. She never complained, not once, even when her feet hurt, or when her manager scheduled her back-to-back with midterms. That girl just kept going, kept trying. I watched her from the kitchen table late at night, bent over her laptop, earbuds in, mouthing sentences to herself as she prepared presentations. She had her father's patience for detail, but none of his laziness. All her fire came from me. But despite her strength, Lena still carried a softness in her voice when she asked, "How are you doing, Mom?" She didn't mean the routine kind of, "How are you?" people toss around. She meant it. She watched me. She saw the circles under my eyes and the tension in my jaw when I opened the bills. I had always told myself I stayed with Andrew for her, that having a father, even a useless one, was better than none. That maybe, just maybe, she needed the image of a full home more than she needed truth. But she saw through it. Long before I was ready to admit it, Lena had already decided she would never follow in my footsteps. When she brought home her boyfriend Val for the first time, I was skeptical. Another boy who dressed like he just rolled out of bed, soft-spoken, slightly awkward. But he had this quiet integrity. He listened when people spoke. He didn't try to impress me, just treated my daughter with warmth and respect. Still, I warned her. You want a life like mine? You want a man who sits on the couch while you break your back to feed him? She smiled. Val's not like that, Mom. He actually shows up. Andrew, of course, hated Val. Said he was soft. Said Lena could do better. Ironic, coming from a man who hadn't held a real job in 2 decades. One night, Lena clapped back. "Don't worry, Dad. I'm not trying to marry someone like you." I should have said something, should have softened the blow, but instead, I swallowed my pride and kept stirring the soup, pretending I didn't just witness my daughter reclaim her voice in the very house that had silenced mine for years. It happened on a Tuesday night just after dinner. I had barely touched my plate. Some leftover pasta I reheated more out of habit than hunger. Andrew ate like a man who had just come home from a full shift, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and casually asked if we were out of cookies. That was it. That was the full extent of our interaction that day. I stood at the sink, staring down at the greasy dishes, my hands submerged in lukewarm water. The dishwasher hummed softly, its rhythm clashing with the sounds of gunfire erupting from the living room, Andrew already back in front of his game. And then, something inside me snapped. I dried my hands slowly, walked into the living room, and planted myself directly in front of the TV. He didn't even look up. He just leaned to the side, trying to peer around me. "Can you move?" he muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. "I went to the doctor today," I said quietly. That finally made him pause. With exaggerated annoyance, he set the controller down and looked up. "Yeah? What for?" I took a breath that burned as it slid down my throat. "I have cancer." For a moment, nothing. Just silence. Then he blinked. "What kind?" "Breast. It's spread. Stage 3. I'll need surgery. Chemo. The whole thing." He made a face like I'd just told him the washing machine had broken. "Jesus, that sucks." "That's it?" My voice trembled. "That's all you have to say?" He shrugged. "What do you want me to do, Helen? Cry?" I stared at him, at the man I had once loved, once married, at the pile of blankets he'd wrapped himself in like royalty. My voice cracked, not with grief, but with disbelief. "I might die, Andrew." He sighed like I was being dramatic. "You won't. You're too stubborn. People like you live forever just to drive the rest of us crazy." And that was it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I simply turned around, walked into our bedroom, grabbed a laundry basket, and started pulling his clothes from the closet. Shirt after shirt, sock after sock, everything he owned. I moved like someone possessed. From the hallway, his voice called out, panicked. "What the hell are you doing?" "Freeing myself," I muttered. By the time he caught up, I was already out on the balcony, launching his belongings over the railing. It wasn't graceful. His boxers fluttered in the wind like ridiculous little white flags. A couple walking. Their dog stopped and stared as one of his hoodies landed at their feet. I didn't care. I wanted the world to see. Let them all watch me purge the years I had wasted. Andrew grabbed for my arm. "Have you lost your mind?" I yanked away, eyes blazing. "Get out, tonight." "You're being insane," he sputtered. "You need help." "No, Andrew. What I need is space to breathe without stepping over your dirty socks. I need peace. I need to survive, and I can't do that with you draining the air from this apartment like a goddamn parasite." He froze, mouth opening and closing like a fish. And then he did the only thing he knew how to do. He called his mother. "Mama," I heard him whisper, his voice shaky. "She's lost it. She's throwing my stuff off the balcony. Come get me." I slammed the door before he could finish. For the first time in over 20 years, I felt clean. It didn't take long. Maybe 45 minutes after his call, I heard heavy footsteps storming down the hall. Margaret didn't knock. She pounded. 3 sharp, violent bursts, like the police. I opened the door. There she was, face red, curls bouncing from the force of her indignation, coat slipping off one shoulder as if she had rushed out of the house in blind rage. "What the hell is going on here?" she barked, eyes darting past me into the apartment. "Andrew says you've lost your damn mind." I didn't flinch. "He can explain that while he's picking his socks out of the bushes." She shoved past me into the living room, arms flailing, like she owned the place. "I knew it. I knew something was off with you, my poor son. He gave you the best years of his life. And this is how you repay him?" I almost laughed. "The best years of his life? Margaret, your son has been living off me like a barnacle for 2 decades. He was trying. He has potential. He just needed more time. He's had 20 years. She paused, then softened her voice into that condescending tone she always used when trying to seize control. "Helen, sweetheart, I know marriage can be hard. But this drama, it isn't necessary. You've always been the stable one." "Oh, I'm still stable," I said coolly. "Which is exactly why I know I don't want to spend whatever time I have left babysitting a grown man." Her face twitched. "What do you mean, time you have left?" "I have cancer, Margaret. Stage 3. They found it in my lymph nodes." For a flicker of a second, something passed over her face. Pity, disbelief, fear. I couldn't tell. But it vanished quickly, and then, in a chillingly calm voice, she said, "So, if something happens to you, the apartment goes to Andrew, right?" I blinked. "Are you serious?" "Well, I mean, you wouldn't want him to be homeless. After all, this is his home, too." "No, Margaret. It's my home. I paid for it, every square foot. And don't worry, I've already filed for divorce. The paperwork is in." She stared at me like I had slapped her. "You can't be serious." "I'm more serious now than I've ever been." Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. That woman was built of vinegar and pride. "You will regret this," she hissed. "Mark my words." "I've regretted a lot of things," I snapped, stepping closer. "But putting myself first won't be one of them." I opened the door wide. She stood there stunned, then finally turned and stormed out. Her heels clicked against the tile like angry punctuation. When the door shut behind her, I exhaled like I hadn't breathed in years. I was still sitting on the couch, staring at the empty doorway, when I heard another knock. This one was soft, hesitant. I already knew it was Lena. Only my daughter knocked like that, as if asking permission to enter a world she already belonged to. "Mom?" she called softly as I opened the door. Her face was pale, eyes red and puffy like she'd been crying the whole way over. She stepped inside without waiting for me to answer, hands trembling as she clutched her phone. "Dad called me," she blurted. "He said you threw him out, that you've gone crazy. And then he said something about you being sick." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I led her to the kitchen table, the same table where I used to help her with math homework, where we folded holiday napkins every Thanksgiving. The apartment was still a mess. Clothes strewn everywhere, the scent of lavender cleaner lingering in the air out of habit. Everything felt wrong, but she was here. And suddenly, I wasn't as scared. She sat across from me, her voice cracking. "Please don't lie to me. Mom, are you really sick?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I have breast cancer, stage 3. It's spread to my lymph nodes." Lena's face crumpled. She reached across the table, gripping my hand with the same fierce desperation she'd had as a child when she scraped her knees. But this time, I couldn't just kiss it and make it better. "How bad is it?" she whispered. I looked her straight in the eyes. "It's bad, but I'm not giving up." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stood and wrapped her arms around me, pressing her face into my shoulder like she was trying to disappear into me. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "You're all I have." I held her tightly. My little girl, the one I had raised alone in every way that mattered. And now she was the one holding me up. Then suddenly she pulled back, wiping her eyes. Her lips trembled again, but this time with something more than grief. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My brows furrowed. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," the words hit like thunder, in a quiet room. "You're what?" I gasped. She nodded quickly, tears still in her eyes. "It's early, just a few weeks. I was going to wait to tell you until things settled down, but now I need you to know." For a long moment I just stared at her, my breath caught. I hadn't expected joy to enter my life again. Not like this, and yet here it was, rushing in like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, warming every frozen corner of me. "You're going to have a baby," I whispered. Lena nodded. "And you're going to be a grandmother?" A laugh escaped me, raw and breathless. "Well, hell, guess I better not die then." She smiled through her tears, squeezing my hands tight. "No, you better not." And just like that, I had something to live for. The next morning, I called my doctor and said the words I'd been avoiding for weeks. "I'm ready to fight." I scheduled the surgery and told them I didn't care how soon it had to be. I wanted it done. The moment Lena told me she was pregnant, something inside me shifted. I wasn't preparing to die anymore. I was preparing to live. But before I could focus on healing, I needed to fix one more thing, something I had ignored for years, out of fear, out of habit, out of that constant whisper in my head saying I wasn't worth more. That Monday, I walked into work, not just as Helen, the dependable accountant, but as Helen Carter, a woman who had survived things no spreadsheet could calculate. My hands trembled as I knocked on my boss's office door. Mr. Daniels barely looked up from his screen. "Helen, I thought you were on leave." "I'm taking medical leave starting next week," I said firmly. "But before I go, I need to talk to you." He raised an eyebrow. "All right." I took a steadying breath. "I've been here 9 years. I've never taken more than a few sick days. I've handled every quarterly crisis, fixed mistakes. Other people worked weekends without complaining. And I've never once asked for a raise." He leaned back, now giving me his full attention. "I need a raise," I said. "Not just for the money, but for the principle, for the work I've done, for the value I bring." There was a long pause. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right. Helen, I'll see what we can do." I left his office with my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. But beneath the nerves was a quiet pride, like something buried deep inside me had finally stood tall. In the days that followed, as I prepared for surgery, I felt lighter than I had in years. Andrew was gone. Margaret had stopped calling. The apartment was mine again, quiet and full of small comforts I had long forgotten. Sunlight poured into my mornings. Clean sheets carried the soft scent of lavender. A vase of daisies from Lena stood proudly by the window. And then there was Eric Lawson. He worked in IT, quiet, smart, always polite. He'd fixed my computer half a dozen times over the years, and every time he did, he asked how I was. Not in the shallow, routine way most people did, but as if he truly wanted to know. After Andrew left, Eric began bringing me coffee in the mornings. At first, I thought it was simple kindness. Then one night, after a particularly late shift, he offered me a ride home. That was when the conversations began. Real conversations about our lives, our regrets, the dreams we'd held and the ones we had let go. He never pushed, never flirted. He simply listened, respected the space I needed. Until one night, sitting outside my building in his old Toyota, the radio playing soft jazz, my hand rested just inches from his on the center console. I looked at him, really looked. The gentle lines by his eyes, the warmth in his smile, and something inside me stirred, something I thought had died long ago. I reached out, touched his face, and kissed him. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fireworks. It was better. It was real, quiet, steady, full of all the things I had forgotten love could be. That night, I didn't cry myself to sleep. Instead, I slept knowing that maybe, just maybe, the best parts of my story weren't over yet. After the surgery, everything slowed down. The buzz of the city that had once pressed against my chest like a weight was replaced by quiet fields, slow mornings, and the steady hum of cicadas in the afternoon. Left Chicago for a while and returned to the small town where I grew up, where my mother still lived in the same white cottage with blue shutters and wild roses climbing the porch rail. Mom, Tamara Nichols, welcomed me home as if I were a little girl again. No questions, no judgment. Just her arms open wide and her famous chicken soup simmering on the stove. "You look tired," she said, helping me out of the car. "I am," I admitted. "Not just from the surgery." She touched my cheek gently. "Then rest. Let the quiet mend what life broke." And that's exactly what I did. Her house smelled of old books and lemon oil. The creaky floorboards felt familiar beneath my feet. I slept in my childhood bedroom, with its faded wallpaper and shelves filled with dusty paperbacks. At night, I listened to the wind rustling through the trees and to Mom humming softly as she folded laundry or watered her plants. During the day, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea, watching the sky shift colors. It was as if the world had paused just for me, to let me breathe, to remember who I was before I became someone else's caretaker. Before I forgot my own name under the weight of duty. One morning, walking down Main Street with Mom, we ran into Valerie Dempsey, my old high school friend who had become a literature teacher. She still had the same bright eyes, the same warm laugh. She hugged me like no time had passed and insisted we grab coffee at the diner. Later that week, I saw Toni Mitchell, mother of 5, chaos embodied, yet somehow one of the most grounded people I'd ever known. She handed me a bag of homemade blueberry muffins. "Eat something that doesn't come from a hospital tray. You're still Helen, not some porcelain doll." We sat on her porch swing while her youngest stacked wooden blocks at our feet. We talked about our kids, about the things life had stolen and the things we had learned to reclaim. Those conversations healed me, raw, real, unpolished. No pity, no awkward silences, just friends, mothers, women who had weathered storms, and still stood tall. In those moments, my body began to heal. But more importantly, my heart began to loosen. The tight knot of fear, anger, and exhaustion slowly unwound. I stopped flinching when the phone rang. I started smiling without forcing it. I laughed, really laughed, until tears rolled down my cheeks and my ribs ached. And every night before bed, Mom would sit beside me, brush my hair the way she did when I was a child, and whisper, "You're still here. That means there's still more joy waiting for you." And for the first time in years, I believed her. It started with nausea. Sharp, persistent. At first, I thought it was the lingering effects of chemotherapy, or maybe a reaction to the new medications. I had just begun to feel like myself again. My energy was returning in small but meaningful bursts. Walks around the block with Mom no longer left me winded. Food tasted normal again. Life no longer seemed colorless, but the nausea didn't go away. It came in waves, mornings, sometimes nights. I brushed it off. Then came the fatigue, bone-deep exhaustion. I told myself my body was still healing, but a whisper in the back of my mind grew louder with each passing day. One evening, folding laundry with Mom, the scent of lavender fabric softener suddenly turned my stomach. I dropped the towel, ran to the bathroom, and vomited. When I returned, pale and shaken, Mom looked at me carefully. "Helen," she asked softly, "when was your last period?" I froze. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. With surgery, treatments, stress, I had lost track completely. I don't know." She set the basket aside, placed her hand on my shoulder. "Honey, maybe it's time to take a test." It felt absurd. I was 42. I had cancer. I'd had part of my reproductive system removed. Pregnancy wasn't even a possibility, or so I thought. The next morning, I sat in a cold clinic room in Flagstaff, waiting for the doctor. Seconds stretched into hours. I didn't know which answer I feared more, something new being wrong or something I had never expected. When the doctor returned, his expression carried a strange smile. "Congratulations, Helen. You're about 6 to 7 weeks pregnant." The room tilted. "Pregnant?" I stared as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. That can't be right." But it was. After everything, the diagnosis, the surgery, the radiation, the grief, I was pregnant, the doctor explained gently. My treatments hadn't removed my entire reproductive system. Rare, but not impossible. Timing mattered, and it only took one chance, and I knew exactly when that chance had come. The night I kissed Eric back, the night I let him into my life. Left the clinic, sat in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing in and out. Pregnant. At 42, after cancer. Tears slid down my cheeks. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Maybe the universe wasn't done with me yet. I stared at his name on my phone screen. Eric Lawson. My fingers hovered, hesitated, retreated. Again and again. I didn't know what I wanted from him. Only that he deserved to know. So I typed, "Would you meet me for coffee tomorrow afternoon? There's something I need to tell you." His reply was instant. "Of course. Just say where." We chose a quiet cafe on 7th and Maple, neutral ground, not too close to work, not too intimate, a place where conversations could breathe. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordered chamomile tea, and picked a table by the window. The late autumn light was warm but fading, shadows stretching across the floor. My hands trembled around the mug. Eric walked in right on time. Dark jeans, a gray jacket. That same calm presence he carried like a second skin. He smiled when he saw me, and suddenly everything felt both terrifying and safe. "Hey," he said, taking the seat across from me. "You look good." I gave a small laugh. "Better than a few months ago?" We made small talk, work, the weather, a colleague's questionable taste in holiday sweaters. Then silence. He didn't push. He just waited. Finally, I said it. I'm pregnant. His eyebrows rose. A beat. Then another. I'm about 7 weeks, I continued. I saw the doctor yesterday. I didn't say the rest. He didn't need me to. The math was simple. His mouth parted. Still no words. But his eyes were full. Not of fear, not panic, but stunned tenderness. Like he had stumbled upon a miracle he didn't know he needed. I'm not asking anything from you, I added quickly. I thought you should know. That's all. He reached across the table, slowly, uncertain if I'd allow it. His fingers brushed mine, warm, steady, still no words. But his gaze said everything. A promise, a beginning, and something I hadn't felt in so long. Hope. I stayed after Eric left. The cafe had thinned out, the golden light outside fading into dusky lavender. I sat with my empty teacup, staring at the steam that no longer rose. Quiet settled around me, not heavy, not suffocating, just still. My fingers drifted to my stomach. It still didn't feel real. A child. At my age, after everything. I thought of Lena, her face when she told me she was pregnant. How fiercely she clung to me, terrified and brave all at once. Soon, I'd hold my grandchild in my arms. And months later, maybe, God willing, I'd hold my own baby too. I thought of Margaret, her face twisted in entitlement, demanding I give everything up for her son. I thought of Andrew, his blank indifference as I dragged myself through chemotherapy, while he asked what was for dinner. And I thought of the night I stared into the bathroom mirror, bald, pale, hollow-eyed, wondering if it would be easier to slip away quietly. But I hadn't. I chose to fight. Not for anyone else, not for validation or pity, for me, for the version of me who deserved a vivid, full life, and now I chose again. To live not just for myself, but for the life growing inside me, and for the tiny one soon to arrive through, my daughter, a grandmother, a mother, a woman reborn. When I finally stood, the wind outside had picked up. I wrapped my coat tighter, stepped onto the Chicago sidewalk, and felt the weight of the past months lift with each step. That night, I stood at my apartment window. The same apartment that once felt like a prison of silence and bitterness. Now, it felt different. City lights blinked in the distance. Beyond the hum of traffic, beyond the footsteps below, life kept moving. And so would I. I pressed my palm to the glass, then to my belly. No more surviving, no more shrinking, no more silence. This time I chose life. And I wasn't going back, not ever.